Welcome to the first episode of 4K4U, brought to you by Midnight's Edge, and with our co-host, Valiant Renegade. It's time to talk some 4K, kids. How you doing? Welcome, everybody. As I said in the intro, joining me is Mr. Valiant Renegade. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
Doing the best I can. And, of course, as you said, my name's Tom Connors. If you don't know me already, then that's my name. So welcome to our inaugural episode of 4K4U, the show where we talk about all things 4K, movies, tech, all that kind of stuff. We'll get into your questions. We'll get into the news. We'll talk about issues we have. We'll talk about how we feel about some of the recent releases, some old releases, what have you. But to kick things off tonight, just since this is our first episode, Valiant and I are going to get into a little bit about the history of how we got here to 4K. For those of you who know me out there, know I got my start in home video as far as getting into this strange world of cinema and entertainment, and radio was my other thing I got into early on as well. So that's kind of where my background comes from. But Valiant, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get things kicked off. You can go ahead and get things started.
Well, thanks. Good to see everybody out there, to our chat, to our wrenches. Hope you guys are all having a great evening. So for those of you who don't know, before I was kind of, the business financial mind, like I like to do on my YouTube channel, back in high school and through college, I put myself through by working in the AV business. I used to design and sell and install a lot of like custom high-end home theater systems, high-end stereo systems, things like that. My dad was really a gearhead when it came to that stuff, photography, stereo, and it got me into it as a kid. And even I'm now 20 years or so removed from that life, I've still kept up with it. And I still really enjoy it. And I've had a passion for it. And needless to say, I've been bugging Tom for a bit. I said, we need to do a 4K show.
Well, and that was not too hard to twist my arm to get me to do this. Not at all.
Yeah. So let's walk back. I want to do a brief kind of overview. And I know we probably have a pretty decent range of ages of folks watching. So as we kind of go through this progression, some of you are probably going to remember some of these formats. Some of you may have never heard of them before, never seen one. So, but it's going to give us a really good perspective going forward as Tom and I discuss. We always hear Tom about, get the 4K version or watch the 4K version. I'm the same way. And there's a reason for that, and we're going to talk about it. But think back to the first home video format. We had decades and decades of broadcast television. Yeah. And even back when the screens were a fishbowl because they couldn't paint corners. That's why you had round televisions. They couldn't paint corners when they made a picture.
Didn't that also have something to do with the tube?
The tube itself. So in the back, that cathode ray tube that fired the electrons against that piece of glass, the distance changed. So the center was closer, obviously, than the edges.
Yes.
So they had to make it a very roundish fishbowl looking thing in order to bring the distance from the gun that fired the electrons to the panel itself equal all the way around. But the corners would always collapse. So they couldn't have squares at first. They had to have circles because of that. That's true. So as time went on, we got a home video format. We got VHS, right? We got the VHS cassette tape. 225 lines of glorious resolution. You can bring the movies home. You don't have to wait for them to come on TV. You don't have to go to the theater. Well, I mean, at least to see them in the first run you did. But you could bring a movie home and watch it at home. At the same time, we also had a competing format called Betamax. Betamax, actually, of the two formats, was the better of the two. Betamax clocked in around 300 to 330 lines of resolution, almost 50% more than what VHS delivered. Betamax didn't catch on. VHS won the format war. And just as a side note, that was the first and the last time that Sony ever lost a format war because Betamax was Sony. So,
well, and there was a few other formats around this, and we did get into a very in-depth discussion a few years ago with Bill Hunt of the Digital Bit. So if you really, really, really want to get into the intricacies of the history, go ahead there. We talk a little bit more about like Disco Vision and the other formats that didn't quite make it, even a little bit of Laserdisc and all the other stuff that came along. And again, like VHS though had a history. It was kind of
Laserdisc.
There you go. That's a nice one. It had a prehistory in several other formats, right? Like
Mhm.
VHS kind of came along through a couple different kind of ways they used to rebroadcast television.
Yeah.
Bing Crosby was another big person who was into like home video and pushing a lot of that kind of material. A lot of the late night guys from back in the day of television wanted to be able to rebroadcast at certain times and film their shows early or videotape their shows early. So
Yep.
yeah, so video became like the prime format for many years, depending on which version you used, whether it was pneumatic tape or VHS or beta. There's a couple different versions, but VHS became the primary home version.
Right.
And Disney was really one of the major pushes behind that because first things started with rentals mainly, and because you could go buy a movie, but it was ungodly expensive.
Hmm.
But then Disney decided we're going to try this out. So they marketed some videotapes at an affordable price, and they sold extremely well. And they even went against what their original plan was. They said they're never going to release any of the animated classics. Well, the following year after they did that, they released Pinocchio, and Pinocchio became a huge cassette seller. In fact, it was the biggest selling tape of all time until, of course, every major movie that came out after that.
Hmm.
As you'll see in these format wars, that tends to happen with the early days. But yeah, back to where you were, Valiant. So yeah, VHS like reigned supreme for nearly almost 30 years.
Yeah, it really did. And you mentioned Laserdisc, and I just mentioned this was,
Yeah.
in case y'all didn't see it. This is the Star Trek box set. This was one of the, I had the Star Wars one too, and this was 1 through 6. This might have had 7 in it. No, it didn't have 7 in it. I can't remember. No, this was just 1 through. Yeah, it did have 7. Star Trek Generations.
Oh wow. So
So
that's a fairly late Laserdisc, actually.
yeah, that was one of the last big box sets, and at the time, Laserdisc, I mean, it still is. It was certainly superior to VHS in every
Yeah.
format, but it never really caught on. You know,
But Laserdisc is still kind of like the great grandpa to 4K disc, really, in
it
a way.
is. It was the first optical disc. Laserdisc came out actually in the 70s. Pioneer was the first to make a Laserdisc
Well, it was
player.
actually
And
analog, but it did eventually have like digital audio and a few other things. But yeah,
right, it was, well, I say optical format because it was still an optical pickup.
correct.
So yeah, so it was an RF analog encoding on the disc, and a lot of people see those things and it's like, well, it looks like a 33 RPM record, but it looks like a CD, but it's not digital. You're right. They did have digital soundtracks on there later when Dolby Digital and Dolby AC3 came out, but they still held up very well. And in fact, the first, of course, big digital format, and this kind of gets us into the more modern era, was in the very late 90s. We got DVD.
Yeah, which kind
And
of replaced the Laserdisc in a way.
it replaced both the Laserdisc
Well,
and the
both, but at
VHS.
first
Yeah.
they thought, oh, this will just replace the Laserdisc. It'll never take over as the
Mhm.
main thing. That was kind of the feeling at the time, right?
Yeah, it did, and I remember we had one of the very first DVD players in North America where I worked. In fact, I remember having an event there. We had the president of Sony North America come in and do a little. We had like it was a little dinner party. You know, invited some kind of upper scale clients that the shop worked with, and it was a lot of fun. And it was so amazing to see. And it was the first time I'm like, okay. And it was, what happened was, people, when you were running, I remember we were running still Top Gun on VHS and Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country on Laserdisc. That was two of the big, demo movies that we would use, right? So we used a VHS player for like the average Joe that's not going to have a Laserdisc, but we want to show him a good movie. Top Gun made
Right.
it great for Dolby Surround. When you pop that DVD in there, that's when people went, holy crap. Okay, they didn't. It's like all of a sudden, okay, spending $500 at a time on a DVD player, for an entry level one, didn't seem so crazy, because when they saw that VHS tape of Top Gun, and then they saw a DVD, or they saw a VHS and a DVD of the same movie side by side, it was like, it was undeniable. The step up you were getting, and that was the first big move into digital. And of course, from there, we later got, about 10 years later, we had Blu-ray. Now, when Blu-ray came out, we had DVD that was about 450 or so lines of resolution.
420 in most cases, but yeah.
420. Yeah, 420. And we got a big step up from there. We went to Blu-ray, which gave us a quadrupling of basically of the resolution there to 1080 by 1920.
Yeah, now that blew my mind growing up, because like just jumping like from VHS and Laserdisc to DVD was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, holy cow, this is like, I've never seen a movie before. And it was falling in love with movies all over again. And then it was like Blu-ray came along and I'm like, fuck these DVDs.
Yeah. And you mentioned the whole thing about they thought they'd get the Laserdisc crowd. I had a big library of Laserdiscs.
Right.
I didn't adopt too many DVDs at first because when I looked at, for example, like when the first DVD editions of Star Wars came out, I had the Laserdisc editions. And the DVD editions really didn't look any better than the Laserdisc.
In some cases, you're right. Yeah. Especially with earlier televisions and until you switch over to an actual better television. And that's the thing is, me, on the other hand, I was never fortunate enough to get invested in Laserdisc. I wanted to. I just never had the opportunity. I know a few friends that did, but I got to experience it and see it here and there and stuff like that. But I never got to dive into it. But then DVD came along, and that was luckily the same time my family was looking at investing in their first home computer. So I talked my dad into getting one with a DVD drive, and it just so happened to have like a 32-inch monitor. And this bitch was huge.
Yeah, 32 inches back then.
Oh,
man.
That was huge. Like, I mean, holy shit.
Yeah.
And it was a big beast. But the picture quality on that compared to a regular television set, because you got to remember, I'm basically like what would be a CRT screen or whatever.
Yeah. So
that would just pull that quality out of that DVD. And yeah, Duck Nation, you are correct. European DVDs were actually a little bit better quality. But in some cases, the problem was you had the speed up for the PAL. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, eventually at some point, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Frame rates on PAL.
Yeah. But yeah, so you're right. Like, so DVD came along, and for years they did a great job of upgrading the format. Cause you can even look at, like you said, your classic DVDs. In a lot of cases, they weren't much better than the Laserdisc. And in some cases, they were the exact same thing as the Laserdisc, because they were basically just the digital master they used for the Laserdisc.
Yes.
Disney was notorious for this, and so was Paramount.
Yeah,
especially
recycling the same things over and over again. But you know what? It worked because they said, well, shit, people keep buying it. So
yeah. Well, at that point, it was a better for a lot of us who didn't have the Laserdisc. I mean, it was a big jump in quality anyway. It didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And that was their thinking.
Yeah. So like then though, you're right. Like, so I remember, so 98 would have been when I got my first DVD. I jumped into Blu-ray though pretty early on too, because I got the PS3 on a really hella deal. And this would have been the year it came out. So it would have been 2006 Christmas, I believe.
Yeah, 6, 7 is when they first started.
I can't remember if it was 6 or 7, but like on the first 5 Blu-rays I got, I kind of remember now, were Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Halloween, which is going to come up later. Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the other few, but like those were the 2 big ones I remember sticking out to me at the time. I think maybe like the Simpsons movie and something else, because they were all pretty new. So it had to be 2006, I think. Because Simpson movie came out in 2006. If it was 2007, I'd be surprised. But anyhow, so like, yeah, so that was the deal I got. And from there, my collection just ballooned. But then I was resistant to 4K because there was another format right in between there called Blu-ray 3D. And I mean, we jumped over a few other competing formats, but I mean, those we can talk about in
they had like DivX and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they had DivX, you had HD DVD, you had a couple
basically it was the same resolution as like DivX and DVD were kind of in the same area. Just DivX never took off because it was like a rental thing, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and we get into that with our discussion with Bill Hunton, actually, so you can check that out if you want to on that. But yeah, then HD DVD kind of the same thing. It was just
HD DVD was the Toshiba. I think it was Toshiba.
Toshiba and Microsoft were behind it.
Yes, and again, like I said earlier, and that's why I brought up Betamax was the last time Sony would ever lose a format war, because Blu-ray was Sony and Philips.
Yeah.
So and Blu-ray won the day. I even still have an HD DVD copy of a Harry Potter movie, maybe Goblet of Fire. I don't remember. But yeah, I mean that went out quick. But yeah, anyway, from there we went after Blu-ray, we jumped up another 4x scale to where we are now, which brings us to the conversation, which is 4K, which is 2160. We go from 1080 to 2160 by 4096, at least not in the...
Yeah, it's roughly 300, it's close to
but
4,000 pixels across for the theatrical version.
3840 for the
So that's where the 4K version actually comes from, because it's 4,000 lines, it's 4,000 across in theatrical version of the 4K format. So that's where that derives from. And then it also, since it's 4 times the resolution, they just went with that, which is odd because, we went from, 1080p, to calling it 4K, which I know is strange, but that's because it's a varied format compared to 1080p.
It's a
lot of ways.
multiplier is what they did.
Yeah.
So like 1080p HD is 2.2. Think of your like cameras out there, folks, to make this easy. A high definition, what you're watching now, if you're watching a stream in HD on Midnight's Edge, you're seeing 2.2 megapixels. It's each picture, each frame. Okay. Each 24 frames or 30 frames a second, 2.2 megapixels is the resolution totally. 4K is 8.8. So you're literally quadrupling because you're doubling the horizontal and the vertical axis of the resolution. So
Right.
that's why you're going 2.2 to 8.8. And what's critical to understand about that as we move into this next part of the discussion, the reason why this has been, I think, probably one of the, I think if we get past 4K, we're reaching into the laws of diminishing returns. But when modern movies are shot, and let me grab the one I was going to use. When modern movies are shot on these Arri Alexa cameras, they're shot in 4K DCI. Some have 6K sensors, but the reason is when you go see a movie like 1917 in the theater, shot by the great Academy Award winner for that movie, Roger Deakins, master cinematographer. Beautiful film if you haven't seen it. That was shot in 4K on an Arri Alexa Mini LF. And it was delivered straight through without any compression right to the 4K format. That movie looks gorgeous on that disc. I mean, it looks like it came right off the Arri, right through color grading and nothing else. It's beautiful. And that's one of the reasons that the 4K format is such a huge jump. And we're going to talk about some of these other movies and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that we've gotten kind of where we're at today, like, because I was a little late into adopting into 4K because, as I mentioned just before, I jumped on the 3D bandwagon. So you really had to convince me, and at first it wasn't in 4K's favor because, as you just pointed out with that movie 1917, fortunately for fans of that film, it was shot. It may have even been shot, I believe, it because most aren't the Arri cameras at like 5 or 6K actually, and then they just
certain ones are. But
okay. So if they shot it at native
LF is I'm pretty sure the Arri Mini LF is one of their newer version. Instead of using a super 35 millimeter sensor, it actually uses a full frame sensor.
Oh, okay.
And it's usually shot in 4K. So the sensor itself is a native 8.8 megapixels.
Okay. So, okay. So in this case, you got lucky that it's, the raw matches the final output. But for the longest time there, especially when 4K was only really releasing newer films, this is what my point of contention was with the format was, why would I spend extra money on a brand new TV and a new version of a movie I already own when the newer version is just going to be an upsampled or upconverted version of the 2KI, which the inner positive is what the I stands for.
Yep.
What is there a reason for why would I even want to do that? That makes no sense. So there was a lot of time where I butt head with a lot of people on why this format was even coming other than to kill my beloved 3D, which they were trying to do that already, it seemed like. And I'm like, what the fuck is your problem here? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
the other example I used the other night on MEAD was like, okay, that movie, and I was trying to give examples of modern movies before we talk about what I know you and I really want to get into is some of the older stuff. But the modern movie, like if I were to take, for example, Avengers Endgame, right? A heavily, CGI post-production film that was shot either in 4K or maybe 6K. But when it got into post-production, when they actually started rendering the digital interface or the digital animation and all that kind of stuff, that's processed in 2K DCI. That's processed in a format that's basically a smidge higher than 1080p. And then once they finish it and they get all the animation in, it gets upscaled from that back to 4K for delivery to the theaters.
Which sucks because Endgame was actually shot with 4K and 6.5K Arri raw data files.
Yeah, but again, it's a matter of if you have to do a shitload of post production, you can't run 4K raw and add that much animation in 4K RAW, it would consume an enormous amount of time and resources, and
Well, the
it's just
speeds aren't there yet. It would
they're
take
not.
so long because it literally takes like 4 times the amount of time. So
Yeah.
let's just say if it takes you 6 months to make a movie like Avengers, and 2-3 months of that time is you rendering out those effects and getting them done, that's added another almost year onto your production right there just to do it in 4K. Now, there have been some films like 1917 that have been done from beginning to end in 4K, but
Mhm.
they're generally not that effects heavy.
Right. That's just it. So I mean, if you want to buy like the recent rom-com or something like that, to where there's really nothing in there but the rom-com, and you want to buy it in 4K, you'll probably see a notable uptick from the Blu-ray. But when it comes to, there's other factors in 4K besides just the pure upgrade in detail. You've got things like HDR, high dynamic range. You have more color depth.
Right.
A lot of that will add, like, there's a notable difference between,
The only
Blu-ray
effects
to
heavy
flip.
movie that I know of that's been released in 4K yet
Mhm.
is The Rise of Skywalker, which nobody fucking wants.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
there's
maybe
a
the
few of
last
'em out there.
Jurassic movie and a few others, but I think,
Yeah,
but yeah,
those are in 4K, but like I said, the most notable upgrade is the color depth in the high dynamic range. So you're able to extract a little bit more of what those RE cameras are actually picking up in terms of dynamic range, which is, for those of you out there, is the ratio of the darkest point of the image to the brightest point of the image. How much shadow detail is still left in there versus it being crushed out. How much highlight detail is still in there versus being crushed out. The higher the dynamic range, the more you'll get to see that. One good example I always use is, like, if you watch the first scene of The Nun on a streaming service where there's tons of compression, and because they have to deliver it to you via internet, that first scene where she's walking down the hallway, it's like the black areas, it's just black. It's a black blob, right? If you actually watch that movie on a disc, on the 4K disc, where you have the HDR, the high dynamic range and everything, there's so much depth and detail in that hallway that you literally can't see a lick of it when you watch it on streaming.
yeah,
So,
and I mean, there's going to possibly be a few cases where you are going to get a bit of an upgrade, even if the master is in 2Ki. Like, here's a situation. Now, this is going to get us into kind of the modern news
mhm.
because I haven't got my hands on it yet. It hasn't showed up on time, and this is another thing we're going to talk about later. But I was supposed to get Inglorious Bastards yesterday,
Oh,
but I didn't get it. But I'm now starting to wonder if I even want it. Because sadly, even though this film was shot on fucking film, one of the rarities, because, Tarantino.
right. And it doesn't have a lot of special effects that they had to
No,
render in
no.
later.
The master's still in 2K. So instead of
Mm,
going back
and
and
rescanning the negative.
rescanning the goddamn thing,
Mm-mm.
they released an up-converted 2K version of it. And
Yeah.
people are pissed. It looks
Yeah.
like shit, I hear. I have not been able to see it myself, and Duck Nation himself just said it here in the chat.
It's not gonna look any better than the Blu-ray then in that case, because that's
No,
the same file they used to make the Blu-ray version that I have,
exactly. And
and
in
all they
fact, it
did
makes it
was
look worse in some cases, I've heard,
yeah.
because they ran HDR on it, which in some cases that will help, right? I'm not going to lie about that.
It can, but it's not what you're buying the 4K for, just to
Exactly.
have an HDR grade on no. You
It
want
may
more than
help.
that.
Now, the only place I can see this helping is possibly the digital version. Why? Because you'll probably get a little bit higher bitrate version coming out of the digital version. So the down conversion and compression you're getting from the might look as good as the Blu-ray.
Well, that's
But
just it. Yeah. The
there's some
but
people who are saying now that the Blu-ray in the set actually looks better because it doesn't have the goddamn HDR on it, which I guess they did a shitty job on that.
and
Which
that can
I will
happen
tell you,
too.
here's the thing with HDR and Dolby Vision, kids. You have to adjust your sets. I know it's a pain in the ass, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's gonna vary by movie. Sometimes you're just gonna have to tweak it. Now I've got it set up to where I like it where I'm at, and for the most part, I usually don't have to mess with the picture very often. You're gonna hopefully get to that. But if you're somebody who especially uses a projector, from what I've heard, you're definitely gonna be playing around with the settings a little bit here and there.
You should be able to calibrate it kind of
Usually you can get it pretty close
correctly
to
and get
where,
it
yeah.
right. And I mean, for those of you out there, like, okay, just for my example, I know, Tom, you have an LG, right? I have an
Yeah.
LG. I've got an LG C9 series right back here. That's my 4K reference set in the house. It's a 55-inch set. And I think I paid maybe around $1,400 for that one. I don't
Right.
remember. So my point is, you don't have to spend $4,000 and $5,000. The reason why I bring up LG, I think for the money, there's probably not a better 4K set out there unless you spend a lot more.
Yeah, unless you're
Number
going to get into
one.
like QLED or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, well, even the Samsungs, when you go to, I'd take the LG. But the point with the LG is what I really like on this set on the C series is they have what Tom is talking about in the menu settings. Like if you don't know how to fiddle and calibrate a set, like some of us old tech nerds do, that's fine. Most people don't. They have ISF certification settings in the set. So if you can take whatever input that your 4K or your Blu-ray player is plugged into, because they're input assignable, you don't have to have the same settings on every input.
Yeah, that's nice.
You can tell it and say, hey, look, I want this to be the ISF certification, which is it comes from the factory with a pre-calibrated grade for cinema. So if you don't know what you're fiddling with, it makes it real freaking easy to just click that and for that input. And when you play that Blu-ray, your color grade on your set should be matching pretty consistently with a good quality disc.
Yeah, the only thing I've ever had to really mess with on some of those kind of settings you're talking about is sometimes once in a while I still have to take that true motion shit off. They still have that on there in some settings.
Well, in the ISF mode on the LG, that shuts all that shit off.
Usually, yeah. Like I've had a couple where I've had to turn it off still. But Willie brings up a question I knew we were going to have to field pretty early on, and it's a very, very pertinent question. But before we do that one, we did have a super chat from Mexican Iron Man to kick off the show. He says, I'm here to send in the first super chat for this very important and hopefully weekly show. I'm newly 4K converted disciple of Tom 4K. Let's do this. And yeah, my nickname Tom 4K, of course, comes lovingly from Paulie of Latino Slant. So I got to tell him thank you for that. Then we had Cedar Stuff come in with this one here. He says Cinema DCI 4K is 4096 by 2160, and that's what I meant. Thank you.
Yep.
And then the 4K version at home is a little bit different with just 380/40 by 2160. Do they crop it? As the ratio ever slightly different? It's
yes,
not. It depends. And the other thing is the file type, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause see, at the home cinema we get the black bars. See, when they send the files out to like theaters, in most cases, you're not going to have the black bars. They just got to adjust it to their whatever settings they have at the theater. It varies. Mm-hmm. But in most cases, it's going to be a flat file, no black bars, unless it's an IMAX file, which it might. But in some cases, as far as I know, aren't they supposed to still be doing the full? I don't know. There's digital IMAX file places, so I'm not even going to get into that. But yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like you said, most of the times they'll just change the matte of the screen. Mm-hmm. So like when you walk in a theater, I mean, you don't always notice it. But I mean, depending on how the movie was shot, you might have the curtains closed this much, and the next movie they're open this much.
Yeah.
But they do, because there's 235 to 1, there's 185 to 1, there's all kind of different formats.
See,
but yeah, the cinema, the DCI
the difference
4K is that's like what Ari shoots in. If you have grab it because it's right here. This is my Canon R6. I can shoot this. I can shoot this in what you call home 4K, which is also what's known as UHD, ultra high definition. You'll see that used a lot.
Yes.
But there are also formats on some of the other Canons that I have, some of the cinema models, where you can pick and choose, like, I want to shoot this in UHD or I want to shoot it in 4K DCI. And you can the Aries do the same thing, and so do the Reds, like the Dragons and some of the newer ones.
Well, I think the easier way to explain it is, how on TV, like I said, you get the black bars on the top and the bottom, and the same thing if you have a 4:3 screen, you have the black bars on the sides. Well, the cinema is set up to where they're not going to get any black bars whatsoever on the top and bottom, but they might on the sides. I just thought of this because I saw Venom the other night, and there was bars on the sides, because it's sent out in that 496 by 2160 format. But since that movie is not the full 235 or 240 ratio, it's the 16:9 ratio or the 185 flat. So they send it out with that black on the side. And like you said, normally in normal theaters, they would normally just bring the curtain in to cover that up, but they didn't at this place. But oops.
Oops. Yeah, that's all that was. That was
it was just an oops.
Yeah.
But yeah, normally that's why that difference is. It's just a slight variation. I don't think you're losing anything. Now, there have been situations in the past where they've done remasterings and they fucked up the cropping. That we can probably talk about, and it'll come up. And that's another problem altogether. But Sean Carter says 4K4U. Well, fork you too, Tom. Thank you. I'm glad you kind of got that little You kind of being funny with punny words. So yeah, then we got another one here, and I think then we're caught up with super chats, and we'll get to Willie's question here because that is a very pertinent question. I'm just making sure. Yep, we're good. Okay, so C Cantina 28 says first G Kids forgets the 4K of Wolf Walkers. Now this, the Blu-ray community keeps getting hurt really bad. I'm depressed to being a part of it. Now, I get where you're coming from, CC, or I think it's CC Antennae. Is that what it's supposed to be? I'm probably been saying it wrong all this time. We're going to get into this similar thing with Shout Factory later. We're going to talk about it, but I kind of know where you're talking about here with how, us consumers or customers, the real diehards, the ones who are the bread and butter of these industries, we do get treated like crap. And we're going to get into that a lot. And I know we're going to have other guests that are going to come on the show eventually and talk about a lot of these things because, there's a reason why movies and Blu-rays and stuff like that, and they're not as cool as they used to be when they got the DVDs. We got all the different kind of formats sorry, I meant I got distracted there for a second. We got all the cool special features and all the cool menus and all that kind of stuff. And then it just started getting less and less and less. There's a reason for that. And we'll get into that in a later show. But I feel your pain there, CC Antennae. And then, okay, so Willie Woodward asked, I know, Tom, that there's no time presently, but you have to convince me why I should care about 4K. I don't know if we're going to be able to convince you, but we're going to do our best here. I've been fine with DVD, and I've never really noticed any difference between DVD and Blu-ray. And all right, so first things first, it's all subjective, right? Like a lot of it has to do with how much you really are invested in what kind of quality picture you get and what kind of picture sound you get and all that kind of business. And if you're somebody who's not that hung up on that sort of thing, then you're probably not going to notice just because you're not paying attention to the differences. Because when it comes to some cases, especially with the latter DVDs and compared to early Blu-rays or latter Blu-rays now compared to early 4Ks, there's probably not going to be a lot of noticeable difference. And as we just pointed out, in some cases, there's not going to be any difference. In fact, they could make it look worse. So as far as that argument goes, I can't convince you there. But what I can convince you of is that movies that were shot on film have never looked better than we've ever seen them. And they have gone back to the original masters. And there's no real way you're ever going to be able to really see the difference unless you see it either side by side or compare it yourself. And another probability might be that your setup. See, a lot of times people's setups they don't know. And I'm not saying you're not tech savvy or anything like that, but sometimes you just don't always know how to set up your TV properly, hook it up properly. I noticed that with DVD early on. Some people didn't even know how to take it out of the 16:9 format so they could, or to take it out of the letterbox so they could watch it in proper 16:9 on their TV. So they had it all squished and shit, and stuff like that. You'll have that sometimes. And I'm not saying that that's your problem either. But again, I feel like it may just be the atmosphere or how you're viewing it. Because if you got a small TV screen and you're fine with that, chances are you're never going to notice a difference because you kind of have to have a larger viewing screen to really appreciate what you're going to get out of 4K. And again, hopefully if you're listening through the show, you'll kind of get the differences and why we bring these points up. But 4K isn't going to be for everybody. Now, I don't know if there's another part of this you want to bring into it, Valiant, that you can maybe help convince him. But
I think you kind of covered all the good bases. Willie, my only question would be, and if you want to kind of drop a comment in the chat, I'll try to keep an eye on it. I'd be curious to know, number one, I mean, if you own a Blu-ray player, what movies have you compared side by side, if any? I'm just curious. If you haven't, that's fine, because there's, there were DVDs out there, and I think I might have mentioned this on MEAD as well last night. Total Recall, movie I love. I had a DVD copy of it. The DVD copy looked pretty good. I was happy with it. The first Blu-ray version that came out was shite. And I mean, it was like a $10 Blu-ray. I got it because I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I watched it. I'm like, it looks no better than the DVD. You were right. And I'm a guy who knows what to look for, and I wasn't impressed. Now they since came out with the 30th anniversary edition where they actually went back, like Tom just said, to the original film negative. They didn't do a crappy upconvert. They went back to the original film negative. They actually did a real good 4K scan, did the HDR grading, remastered the sound and everything. This is spectacular. This is as good as it looked in the theater, or really better.
In some cases, better, yes.
Yeah, it all depends on what you're watching, Willie, and what you're watching it on, like Tom said. So I'd be curious to know, what kind of TV do you have? What have you tried to play on it? And the settings, all that kind of thing. Now, I will say this: if you weren't enamored with Blu-ray, and like Tom said, if your preference is more the older film stuff, like you're not watching a lot of movies from the last 10, 15 years, your stuff is like me, like Tom, 70s, 80s, 90s. That was our bread and butter. And if that's the kind of stuff, then probably good on you for skipping Blu-ray. Just jump right into 4K. You're not going to be disappointed. This really has made a tremendous difference, especially with the older film stuff.
Yeah, and I know, Willie, you like, now there's certain things I will say, like if you're somebody who's probably like an anime fan or heavy duty into animated stuff, honestly, I've got a few 4K titles that are animated, and I've not really noticed a huge, massive improvement, because animated is really kind of good, because it's usually set to where the lighting and everything. There's nothing going to change with the dynamic range run on an animated film. I don't think that wouldn't ruin.
You talk about like the computer animated stuff?
Well, just even in general, like even hand drawn animation, because the only ones I've got right now are like Transformers, and I've got Akira, and
the color depth and the brightness will be more
that
solid.
helps a little bit, but
that's about it.
Yeah,
and the computer animated stuff like the Pixar movies, guess what? They're done in 2K.
Yeah, in most cases they are, unless they actually do them in 4K, which then they will look a little bit better.
Yeah,
but that's just, they're still at the limitation of their art. But again, it has more to do with what are you after? And if you're fine with just watching it the way you're watching it and you're enjoying it, DVD is going to be around for a good long while. It's not going away anytime soon.
And even the 4K players can still play DVDs. So if you go out and spend $200,
and some actually do some really great up conversion. I don't have the box here anymore, but the Sony XP, I think it's the XP 700 is the one I have, and it does an amazing job of up converting not just DVDs but Blu-rays, and even adds its own version of Dolby Vision, which in some cases does help. I've watched some really crappy looking Blu-rays that look much more improved on that player, because then it up converts it to 4K plus adds the faux Dolby Vision, which does help out balancing the blacks and pops out some of the colors a little bit more. And that's the real thing with 4K, is beyond just the resolution, as as Valiant was starting off the show with talking about. You get the color depth, which he touched upon a little bit, but that's the bigger picture here, especially when you get into dynamic range, because the amount of color and the precise colors you can get is a lot more than what we're used to. And that's where these things stand out a bit more. And even in some cases, you can get a 2K master that looks better in 4K, because as Valiant just said, you can get those colors to pop out a little bit better. But sometimes it can also be a detriment. So again, it's mileage may vary, but we're going to talk about some titles that may or may not convince you to get on the 4K train. And if you don't, hey, it's not a cheap endeavor. That's the other thing you got to keep in mind. It's something that's it's definitely something you have to have a budget for. It's not easy.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things I tell people, if you buy physical media, which I encourage people to do, like if you're just watching stuff on streaming and you're fine with that, or you watch it when it comes on cable or satellite or Netflix or whatever, that's fine. But if I like owning the physical media copies for a number of reasons, but if you're buying physical media anyway, because I see people, oh, well, I bought the digital version on iTunes. It was $20. I'm like, you could have bought a physical media copy for $22 that would have had the 4K, the Blu-ray, and the digital copy that you just paid $19 for.
Yeah.
So I tell, if you're buying movies, if you're buying them and you're building a library, if you already own a Blu-ray player, especially
proof yourself.
Exactly. Buy the 4K versions, because the one I just held up, look, it's got the Blu-ray, it's got the 4K, and it's got the digital copy. So even if you don't have this yet, it comes with this, so that when at some point you upgrade, you've already got it. Yeah. And it only costs maybe $3 to $5 more to get the 4K version than the Blu-ray version.
In some
So
cases, not even.
yeah,
So
actually, I was buying 4K discs before I really had a 4K
me
player.
too. And that's kind of how I helped,
Yeah.
kind of motivated myself, because then it kind of got to the point where we had Jaws and Karate Kid, and I'm like, okay, now I got to get a player.
Yeah,
Fuck
that was
this.
it. Yep. And if
Like
you
a
have a
couple movies in,
PS5,
it's like,
if you have a
yeah.
PS5 out there, you got a 4K player.
And then I upgraded my TV and everything. And speaking of budgets, Taker610, thank you so much for the $5 super chat, says, do you guys recommend a home theater projector under $3,000? Epson 5050 UB has great features, but not full 4K. 4 megapixels, not 8.3 M. Does that matter?
Yeah, because if it's kind of faking 4K, like it can take a 4K signal, but it's going to compress it to output at whatever resolution that sensor is. If it's a 4 megapixel sensor, it's in between. That's going to be kind of weird. I don't know that model. I'll put it this way: I have an
Yeah.
Epson projector at my wife's music studio that we have in the theater, a little small performance theater. And I got it. It's been a couple of years. I think I spent maybe around $2,500, $3,000. It's an Epson, but
Right.
it was a true 4K machine. So I don't know. I'd have to look that one up. Taker 610, but
yeah, and I'm sure there's
always do your
reviews out
research.
there.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Yeah, and here's the other thing I will say is, for that kind of price, I do know there's some true 4K projectors you can get.
There are.
So I would do is definitely do your due diligence. Check a bunch of reviews out on YouTube. The easiest thing to do is just take the model number. You probably already know this. Just throw it up in YouTube, type review, and
Google search it.
Yeah, or Google.
Just
search
remember,
some
you
written
need
reviews.
a lot of light control. If you're going to do a front projector, you have to have a room where you can totally have complete control, windows, everything blacked out. Because that's why that there's some projectors that cost $2,000 and $3,000. That's why there's some projectors that cost 30, 40, 50,000, that are out for home use. We used to sell some of those big ones too, especially from Sony. So, you want to make sure you've got a lot of light control in that room you're using it.
Right. And then we'll take this one last question, or not really a question, more of a comment, and then we'll get into the next topic here. Rob says his problem is room. I have many DVDs and Blu-rays, but ran out of room. Me too. But what I do, my friend, and I don't know if this is going to work for you or not, but I basically just give away any movies that I have rebought, and as long as they don't have anything on the other version that I want, I try to conglomerate as much as possible.
Yeah.
If something has a big bulky box to it, I'll usually take the movies out and put them in my own cases so they don't take up so much room on the set, and then put that away somewhere where it's not, out of sight or whatever. And I know that's a common problem when you're getting into physical media, but it's the price you pay. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Commandant VHS says, lost my digital comic books. You don't own it. That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
Digital is not the way to go, Commandant VHS, and you got a pertinent name for that, I tell you. VHS. Yeah, I'm not a fan of VHS, but it still holds a dear place in my heart. And
it got us here. Yeah.
Yes, got us here. And speaking of VHS, I think it's the best place to start with our news portion of this, since we already kind of covered Inglourious Bastards. There's not really much more to say on that, because they fucked that up. And there's no way of fixing it unless they go back and fix it. So we can't recommend that one right off the bat. But one of the films I bought many times on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and even 4K once before has been Halloween. And it is the season. And as you know, Valiant, it's coming out now in 4K again from Shout, or AKA Scream Factory. That's the original Lionsgate release, right?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, that's the one I have too. And that's from a few years back. I want to say like 5 years back already, if not more.
Maybe it was that long. Yeah.
Something like that. So yeah, Scream Factory rescanned the first film, and it was even overseen by Dean Cundy himself. They scanned Halloween 2 in 4K, and Halloween 3, 4, and 5 for that matter. And they're all coming in some elaborate box set, which I plopped down the big bucks for on Shout Factory's website, which was not cheap. It was clocked in just under $300 altogether after taxes and all that shipping and stuff. Yeah, it comes with a lot of goodies.
Yeah.
And a few other people did as well, and they're feeling
that's
the
like
same.
the collector's box set then.
Yeah. And in the past, Shout Factory has always been pretty good about, the whole deal is when you pre-order through them, you get the movies a week or two before street date usually. And generally I haven't had this problem. But they haven't even shipped my Halloween box set yet. nobody, and nobody's gotten the full big box set from what I know. So a few people have gotten some of the if they ordered just like one movie or just the movies themselves, some people have gotten them. But we had heard last week there was a delay on Halloween 2, which, okay, fine, we understand that. And they were shipping some out that where they were saying, oh, some people are getting the sets shipped out without Halloween 2, and then we'll send Halloween 2 separately. Okay, fine. Well, another thing that happened was Best Buy accidentally dropped the first film, I guess it was. I don't know if it was all the films or just the first film, early last week, and pissed a lot of people off. And now we're getting reports that even Walmart's have them. So there's a lot of pissed off people that have pre-ordered these, not just from Shout Factory, but Amazon and other places who aren't getting them yet. And to me, this is a really bad form for a company like Shout Factory, who, you know, as we talked about earlier about how, they treat the customer like shit. Well, Shout Factory is one of those companies that generally hadn't been treating the customer like shit. And they're one of the few companies who actually seem to give a shit about the product they're putting out. But to me, making sure that the box stores and shit have their copies before the people that pre-ordered it, who are the true fans, who are the ones who are always there buying these things, that to me is a really bad move. And I haven't seen any movement on their part yet to make this better yet.
That is surprising because, like you said, Shout Factory has historically been pretty damn good. You know, they've always, like you said, everything that they have delivered has been to the best of their ability. I mean, the quality of the products they produce, and they specialize mostly in horror stuff, obviously. And but everything has been really, really good, and it's, you know, been on time, and I've never heard anybody complain. So this is new for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard
new for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some random people in the past will have issues here and there, but I personally have never had a problem before. And I've ordered a lot of their big, you know, exclusive sets and stuff like that in the past, and I've never had a problem getting them early like they're supposed to be. But this
plus
time,
the posters, vinyl. Oh, cool.
Yeah, see, this is the one I got here. So, and it actually mine has the buttons with it too, so it's even more than this here. So it was a little bit more than this price. It was like another $25 added on to that just for those buttons. But yeah, so there's enamel buttons that came with it too. But yeah, this is kind of a look at it. But people have not been getting. I see even a few people in our chat are already saying they haven't. Yeah, and even KR Nut says, "Yeah, what the fuck? They usually aren't this bad."
You can't even get it on Amazon right now either.
Yeah, it's sold out there.
3, you know, October 24th, 25th is what they're doing. November 3rd through 6th right now for Halloween 2. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, what really sucks is there's been no statement yet that I know of from Shout Factory, at least not since I last looked. Yeah, and as Mango said, they always do great releases. Like I got my Kong early, like I was supposed to, with the poster. I've never had an issue in the past. All of a sudden now, it's just I don't know. Usually they're pretty. Even when they've had issues with discs in the past, they get out there pretty quickly. They say something about it. They give us kind of a time frame on when we can expect a fix. What the fuck, guys? So yeah, if anybody, I don't know if anybody from Shout's listening, feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to have you on and talk to you. I mean, I did reach out to a few people that I know who know people from there, and they haven't heard anything yet. So, and in fact, to be fair, I'll go check their Twitter real quick to see if nothing else has come up since then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what's your feelings on this though, Valiant? I mean, I know you said personally you've never actually ordered from their direct site.
I haven't. I have not ordered directly from Shout in the past. I just, it's just odd that I'm wondering, okay, obviously they didn't get as many discs put together, I think, as they anticipated selling out, I think is the first problem. I don't know if the vinyl or the posters or anything else is holding up, because obviously this isn't just the discs. You've also got all these little ancillary goodies in there. Maybe there's something missing that they couldn't ship them out. But given the fact that I'm looking here on Amazon and I've just kind of keep going through them and I see in stock soon, you know, and the delivery dates are anywhere from Friday, October 22nd to November 5th for the first 3 Halloween movies. It tells me that
I better get them by Halloween.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this going, they just apparently Shout Factory anticipated X number of sales and they got way fucking more than that. And
Oh, I'm
they went on.
sure. But here's
Yeah.
the thing I think that happened. This is what pisses me off about this. Because they, like I said, they were pretty transparent about Halloween 2 being delayed, right?
Mhm.
They had no problems telling us that like a week and a half ago. But then once the ones started showing up at Best Buy and people were bringing them up online and stuff like that, that's when they seem to go radio silent. I just checked. They have not talked anything about Halloween since I went back like a few days.
Yeah.
Here's my thing I think they did. I think they made a big deal with Walmart and Best Buy. And they knew they weren't going to have enough to make the demand. But instead of hitting the demand of their customers that go directly through the site like they should have, they gave in to the big box stores and made sure they had their shipments first, or those shipments came straight out the factory to the box stores and Shout's still waiting on theirs. Either way, they should have been upfront about it and let us know what the fuck's going on. Because right now to the customer, it looks more like they give a shit about what Best Buy and Walmart thinks before they do us. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, well, if Best Buy and Walmart, and I think I mentioned this before we started the show, was, you know, if they came in and we talked about this, like with Amazon, there was a time when everything you could pre-order on Amazon and you'd have a date of release. You'd get it on,
Right.
you know, it would show up in your mailbox the day that it hit Best Buy and Walmart. Then along came a couple of years ago when we started noticing that that wasn't the case in every movie anymore. Some movies you would order and it would give you an approximate date. You'd get the movie a couple of weeks later. You wouldn't even really be able to pre-order it directly from Amazon. And it turned out that some of these studios, you know, Best Buy, Walmart, Target was another big one. They got tired of shit. Everybody's ordering from Amazon, all this digital media and stuff like this. And by the time it hits our shelves, everybody's pre-ordered it from Amazon and gotten it in the mailbox. I think they probably struck a deal with some studios and distribution companies, paid a little bit extra, basically so they would get first dibs and put Amazon back. And I think that's kind of what happened here with this was that, like you said, Walmart had it, Best Buy had it, and
actually
Amazon.
we did actually have a bit of a public row between them and Disney, and it was a similar situation where
Mhm.
yeah, Amazon was getting pissed because Walmart and Best Buy were getting all these exclusives, and then for a while there, Amazon wasn't getting their shipments from Disney on time, causing
Yeah.
people to cancel Amazon orders and go with other places. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
And I've done that. I've done that to where it's like I ordered something from Amazon and that day came and I pulled up my Amazon orders and it said still has not shipped. I'm like,
well, I'll
okay.
tell you
Well,
what,
they're
every
charging me
major
taxes now, and I pass a
yeah,
Target on the way home. Well, Target has it. I'd go into Target, get my 5% off with my Target
yeah.
card, and go home and cancel my Amazon order.
Yeah, and I don't blame you because I've done that now myself. And this is the thing is, yeah, I've had that once in a while in the past, but now as of recently, it's really gotten bad. If it's a major studio release, I don't get it on time. I don't get it on time.
Yeah.
If it's like a Kino or one of those, I do generally get it on time. But I've not gotten any of the major releases. In most cases, I've had to go pick them up elsewhere, and then, like you said, go cancel my Amazon order. This week, I had the same thing, and this will kind of segue into our next portion of discussion. This week, Universal having issues getting their monster movies out, but
Yeah.
Best Buy's got their fucking steel books.
Yep.
So what the fuck?
And Universal, you're talking about the individual. Well, the steel books,
Yeah, the
obviously, are the
individual steel
individuals,
books, yes,
but
but they don't have the box set. Yeah.
And they don't have well, again, because you know the steel books are one of those Best Buy exclusive things, right? So Best Buy puts in their orders, and Universal or somebody's going to print. All right, we're going to collectively between these 4 films, and it's Frankenstein, it's Dracula, it's The Invisible Man, and Wolfman, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so they'll print. We're going to print 200,000 copies of each, and we're going to allocate 50,000 copies of each. Of those 250 to Best Buy for steel books, they pack those up and they get those out. They package up the other ones. So, you know, Best Buy, and I think that's why Best Buy started doing the steel book thing. They wanted something exclusive. The Amazon can't have this. Target can't have this. This is and even movies that aren't steel books, you see, like, this is a Target exclusive. It's got this sticker in it.
Yeah, they'll have
like
different things. Yeah.
So they all get their exclusive. It's Best Buy is doing the steel book. So, like, you know, Last Action Hero, here's the steel book, right? So this is
yeah, I got that one too. That's a nice steel book.
You know, this is a 4K steel book, you know, so you get the Blu-ray.
Hopefully you use your digital code, otherwise somebody just got it.
Oh yeah, it's already used. You can go ahead and put it in all you want because I do that the day I get it. I
You
don't
do
miss those.
usually.
So anyway, so yeah, so I mean, Best Buy gets their own supply like that, so that if you ordered the box set from Amazon, Amazon is getting pushed to the back of the line again on this. And yeah, it's disappointing, especially when as a studio, you release these titles, Halloween or classic monsters like you have up on screen right now. People expect to get these things, I don't know, by fucking Halloween. And
Yeah,
right now,
exactly.
it doesn't look like it doesn't look like it's gonna happen. We had this
Yeah.
conversation a few weeks ago with this thing.
Yep,
Where the
that's
hell
my point. Yep.
that came out? Star Trek. This is the 4K, the new box set, the new 4K box set of Star Trek, and it's the first 4 films. It's okay. It's Star Trek: The Motion Picture all the way up through Voyage Home, and that sucker took. I mean, that thing arrived, and I ordered from Amazon. It was 2 weeks after it came out. Now the problem is I couldn't find it at Target. I couldn't find it at Best Buy anyway. They were gone. So I had to suffer and wait. But it was 2 weeks
Yeah, I remember
after the
talking to
release
you about
date
it behind the scenes. Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, I was like, it's
Because
pissing
I
me
ended
off.
up, what I did, because my Amazon one was still sitting there,
Mhm.
couldn't order it through Best Buy either. They were sold out there. But all of a sudden, I got an alert.
Mhm.
Like the first time I've ever gotten one of these, and it paid off. And the closest Best Buy to me got 4 of them in stock.
Run!
So I went online real quick, got that, and I'm like, fuck it, since I'm here, and I'll grab Shawshank Redemption too, because I liked how the steelbook looked. Even
Oh,
though I
yeah.
already had mine sitting downstairs from Amazon still in the thing. I'm like, fuck it, I'll send that one back.
Yeah, I didn't do the steelbook, but I got
Yeah.
the
Oh, I
the
love that
regular one.
steelbook. Here's the thing, I'm not a huge steelbook fan, but once in a while I'll see one that's like I gotta have. Like I loved that Last Action Hero one.
Oh, yeah.
The steelbook, to me, the cover looked better than the one you just held up there for Shawshank. So grabbed
Mhm.
those, went down there, bought them. I prepaid for them, so I knew they would be waiting for me, and I'm glad I did, because by the time I got down there was only one set left. So
Yeah.
and if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't have been there. With my luck. So like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
no, yeah, and the same thing with Indiana Jones. I had to cancel that one, and then order it from Best Buy, and I finally got it in the mail like 2 weeks
that
late.
was the
But
same
yeah,
as Star Trek. It was the same thing. You and I were behind the scenes on DMs like, "The fuck?" It's like I couldn't get indie. It was like a week and a half, 2 weeks after it came out, my
I
pre-order
know.
from Amazon finally showed up, you know? And I wound up with 2 of
Yeah.
them somehow because I ordered 2 by
Oh
mistake.
yeah, I think you asked me if I needed one still.
Yeah, and then I wound up sending that one to Mexican Iron Man.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah, Mike got it.
Cool.
So,
Well, I gave him my digital copies. So
there you go.
or of Star Trek, I gave him my digital copies. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
okay,
so
cool.
he's got his own 4K box set of Indiana Jones, the trilogy, and then the coaster, that
Nice.
comes as the 4th disc in that set.
Oh yeah, that one. I use that regularly as a coaster as well.
I hear they're making a new coaster.
I hear they are making a new coaster.
Gotta hope not.
I
want
hope
it to
this
be
one
good.
has
I
a
want it
much
to be
better
good.
image on it, though.
Ugh.
So yeah, so that was the big news this week. So like, obviously, so this is what I did, I guess, to finish up the monsters thing. Since I just got the email again from Amazon saying they don't know when the fuckers are coming. So I went and I said, to hell with it, and I went on Best Buy, and I got lucky. They still had some of the steel books available, and I just bought Dracula and Frankenstein. I'm not so worried with Wolfman and Invisible Man right now. I've got them all on Blu-ray 2 times over. I'll just wait till I can get them on Black Friday dirt cheap. I'll buy the whole box set again. But no, like that's what I did, and it's like fuck it. So I ordered those. I hopefully will have them the next 2 days because I think they already shipped out. So it is what it is, and you got to kind of make it work for you guys. I know it's probably different in other areas, but if you're lucky enough to have if you have like a local store that's like a mom and pop shop, hit them up. A lot of times those guys will be glad to help you, and they'll get those movies in, and they'll make sure you have them there, and when you need them and stuff like that. And a lot of times that's the best way to do it. That's what I miss. Besides when I had my own video store and I could just get my own shit. And then people are talking about Shrek is also another one of those that was 2K up converted to 4K.
It's animated. I mean, that's Larry. That's how they do it, because when they animate those, especially a movie like Shrek that was done now, oh my God, 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
Yeah, I don't even know if they could rerun.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, when they do that animation, it's in a 2K format. Now, I mean, instead of having your Blu-ray player or your television up convert the Blu-ray to 4K, they're doing it in, in the processing software. They're doing it in Adobe Premiere, for example, or Final Cut. So that computer is probably doing a much better job of scaling that image up and then giving you a
And they can
4K
also
disc
do it
that's
scene
native.
by scene and stuff like that
Yeah,
too.
so
But
it'll look a little better that way, but yeah, it's not going to be night and day. It's not.
and that's the problem is a lot of times the guy here's the thing where it
This
gets
was freaking
into
night and day.
yes.
That
Yeah.
blew my mind when I watched it. I got this last week and I watched this and my jaw, I think I even texted you in the middle. I was like, my jaw just hit the floor. When I saw the
It does
first,
look really nice.
oh my God, it's beautiful. And I got Bridge Over the River Kwai just showed up at the house today. So,
yeah, I got a few I
that.
got to crack into yet, but like no, more recently, I guess probably the better ones I've seen besides Shawshank. Gosh, I'm trying to think now which ones stood out to me. I mean, the Trek ones were pretty good,
Yeah.
but I know I think Robert Meyer Burnett, and this is going to get me into this portion of this conversation. And this is another thing as far as like it all depends on who's behind the mastering process too. Is
Yes.
I don't know if you noticed this or not, but Robert swears up and down that the color timing, at least on the first Star Trek film, is off. And I do notice that it does shift into the blue throughout the entire film outside of one scene, and that would be the Vulcan scene where it shifts into really heavy-duty reddish orange.
Okay, well, there have been a lot of cases, and Robert could be correct. I haven't watched the motion picture on 4K yet because I've never really watched it that much as a movie. I always loved 2, 3,
See, that's
4,
my
6.
problem too, yeah.
Yeah, I love that Nick Meyer
I've
force
seen the
edit.
director's version more than I've seen the other version.
So what happens a lot of times, and this happened with The Matrix. So when The Matrix first came out on Blu-ray, it had the same kind of
Greenish hue or
yes,
something like
it had
that.
really, really deep greens, and basically what happened was they left the color grade in the cinematic color grade, and sometimes just for folks out there that don't understand, video and audio that you master for a cinematic release do not always work for the home release. You have to make adjustments. If people think back to like the whole THX thing, the reason was
Mhm.
like in a theater, the high frequencies were overdriven for the movie in the theater. The high frequencies, especially in the front channels, were overdriven by usually anywhere from 3 to 6 decibels because the speakers were behind the movie screen. And even though they
Right.
were acoustically transparent
Plus,
movie
people in the
screens,
back got to hear it too. Yeah.
right, you had a loss as it passed through there, so they would attenuate the high frequencies up. When you went to the home market, the THX thing that Lucas created, all that would kind of denote that this soundtrack has been effectively remastered for now home use to where it's now going to be tuned in. So they did the same thing with color. And when they did that with The
Yeah.
Matrix, they left that really deep green in that looked great when we saw it on screen, but it looked a little too green when it got to the home television. In the
Right.
4K edition, and that was one of the things they talked about on Blu-ray.com. And that edition was they toned down the green to make it more like you still had that tint. You still knew you were in the Matrix, but it wasn't like the Blu-ray where it was so freaking green on the tint.
Yeah.
It was a little bit more subdued, but it still had the same effect. And that's probably what Robert's talking about on the first Star Trek movie, to where they actually did some correction on the color grading to where it's a little bit more like, and it's been so long we don't remember what it looked like in the theater.
And that's what he was saying too, is the bigger
Yeah.
problem is more so maybe like some young person in there who's never even experienced it like that, or even thought to go back to the old Laserdisc and check it out, or
Right.
some kind of old stills or anything like that, or director's notes or cinematographer's notes or anything of that, editor's notes, anything. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're just deciding to do it because it looks cool. And that's what
Mhm.
he thinks. And he could be right, but you could also be right too, in a sense. Like, here's the thing, because like in the case of like we just talked about Halloween, they actually had Dean Cundy come back in and recolor time that. And from what I've been hearing, not so much the resolution is better from the Lionsgate version, but the color
Mhm.
timing is completely different.
Yeah.
And it varies from scene to scene. So as far as I know, though, the version we're getting on the shout would be the more accurate version, because that's Dean Cundy. He's the cinematographer. That's the way he meant it to be seen.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go with that one when I get it and say that's my definitive version now, because it was overseen by him.
Yeah,
And I
and
believe
I
he's,
didn't
I think
pre-order
he's
those.
oversaw the second and third one too, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
Hopefully, yeah, maybe so. And I'd be real interested to get your opinion on those once you have the new version in and do a side by side with the Lionsgate.
I
Like,
wish I could. I should have had them
I know.
already.
That's what I said. Whenever you get them in, I would love to see the side-by-side comparison because, like you said, I think that would be my expectation because the Halloween that they did, and I looked it up, it was 2018, so just 3 years ago.
Yeah, and that was scanned from the original negative as
That
well.
was a
So it's
4K
the same
scan.
exact
Yeah.
it's the same exact.
They just remastered, like you said, they did it.
Well, they did
it
a
in
new
color
scan.
grade, and
It's the same film stock, but the same. It's a new scan altogether, though.
Oh, okay.
So whatever technology changes we've had since then will help. Plus, we had Dean Cundy overseeing this one for the color timing, and people are saying this one has a much more warmer color timing, which is of the time.
Yeah.
Like if you think back to the 70s, there a lot of those films do have a much more warmer color timing. For example, the opposite would be Superman. It had a much cooler color timing in the beginning of the film and a much warmer color timing when you get to the Metropolis scenes. And that's another one that I remember the earlier DVDs and Blu-rays kind of fucked with a little bit. But we'll get into that in a different discussion.
Well, you got to remember back then when John Carpenter was shooting that, you pretty much had tungsten lighting and tungsten lighting and tungsten lighting. And that was a very, very warm, like 3,000, 3,300 degree Kelvin color temperature light, which is very warm.
A lot of oranges. And they did that on purpose also to kind of try and make it look more like fall because they shot it in California where everything's green.
If people want to know what that color temperature looks like, think of like the old soft white incandescent bulbs we used to have in the house, that very yellowish orangish light. The soft white, that's kind of that same color temperature. That's what they would use.
So yeah, he clearly had given the film more of a gold or orange tint to try and dial down the greens. And that's what I'm hearing is like the major difference is like when you watch the Lionsgate version, it feels like just a straight scan and you're getting a lot of the green popping out from the grass. And that's what I remember. It looked great.
Yeah.
But like, now that they say that, because most of the versions they've had, I don't think Dean Cundy's overseen one of these since one of the earlier.
I don't think so either. Yeah, no.
I have one of the older DVDs where I think he oversaw the Divimax version or whatever for Anchor Bay, I think it was at the time. And that is going on like 20 years now. Right. So it's definitely due. And it also they all got Dolby Atmos upgrades as well, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, the soundtrack remastering, that's the other side people need to understand is just how much that changes. But I mean, look, just so everybody understands, when they do these, especially with these old film movies, like, it was Top Gun or Halloween, like we're talking about. I got Scarface the other day. These are very, very, Scarface looks awesome. It's very expensive to do this. It is extremely time consuming and very expensive. I mean, it is not like if you take a movie like Scarface, you're going to remaster it in 4K. You're going to sell this out there. You're into it. Just remastering and getting it ready before you shoot out the first disc. You're probably close to 7 figures.
Yeah, and I've heard that before because just to do the scanning alone is like $8 to $10 grand or more.
Oh, it's probably more than that.
It's more than that in some cases.
More than that, yeah. I mean,
they've gotten it down in cost now comparatively to what they used to be, and the same thing for doing Dolby Atmos. It used to be extremely expensive, but now.
But you have to sit there just like a regular film. Like we just shot a bunch of footage on Ari today. We need to get the colorist in here to grade this, and this is what you're doing with the negative. You're paying a colorist to come in just like it's a brand new movie and start from scratch and regrade this sucker, and that ain't cheap. So yeah, it cost a good bit to go through that.
Okay, yeah, looking it up here, it says for 16 millimeter, you're looking at anywhere from 40 cents to $2 per foot.
Linear foot, yeah.
And you
have about in a linear foot, you might have, what is that, like maybe 20 frames a foot?
I can't remember exactly.
I mean, you figure if a linear foot equals 24 frames, that's 1 second.
And 35, I would imagine, is double that probably. So.
Oh yeah, easy.
If you're doing 70, it's even more than that. Which very few films have ever had.
No. We don't have that many in 70 millimeter. But I mean, just some quick math. If that's the rate, so we've got.
And I'm just guessing on the up side of that, but yeah.
So 1 foot per second, so 60 linear feet per minute, let's say, if it's really that. I think it's going to be more than 1 foot per second, but let's just say it is
24 frames a second.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is it's probably more than that. So 60 frames per or 60 linear feet per minute, you have 120 minutes in a movie, or even 90 minutes in a movie. 5,400 linear feet at least. maybe double that. So you might be between 7 to 10,000 linear feet. I mean, it starts adding up. Like I said, the scan is one thing, but it's when you actually have to go in, when you're talking about remastering it,
Mm-hmm.
doing a new color timing, compressing it, and then you start. I mean, you're in it for a good bit of money. It is not a cheap
Yeah,
process.
yeah, it's not a cheap process. We had a super chat from E. Clay Thomason earlier who said, "I have disabilities, so fumbling with discs is a huge pain in the ass. Will studios ever offer digital copies for download like you can for MP3s?" You can on proprietary apps already, but some of them are very limited, and you don't really have the ability to do much else other than watch them, or you can't really transport them much, and you can't watch them unless you have whatever it is on app on that thing. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. My suggestion for you is, especially if you can get some help physically, would be set yourself up with like a Blu-ray ripper and just rip your movies to a digital format, and then set yourself up with like one of those what the hell are they called? Help me out here. Andre's always talking about his, but they're like a digital like hub, and you just put all your stuff in there, and you can
Oh,
like,
like digital media player.
yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
digital, but yeah, you can set it up like Netflix. It has all the pictures and stuff to where you can just scan
yeah.
through your stuff. That might be the best thing for you, E Clay.
Mhm.
Plex server. Thank you, Duck Nation. That's what I was trying to think of. A Plex server. Yeah, something
They
like
have a few
that.
companies and brands that make those things.
Yeah.
They can be kind of expensive, but
And in that case, then you're not sacrificing the quality, but then you're not having to fumble with the discs and stuff like that. And then you can just
mhm.
just store them somewhere else or whatever. Yeah, that'd be my suggestion for you, and I'm sure you can probably find a lot of info on that out there on YouTube and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
that'd be my best suggestion. I don't know if Valiant has any other ones, but like I doubt they're gonna allow us to download the movies anytime soon like that, where they're kind of
No, I don't think so. And
open format.
the only issue is when if you are able to rip these things off of a disc, you got to realize Blu-ray discs have a capacity of like it's 125 gigs. You're talking about a load of data. So
It
if
is
you
one of
if
those undertakings, yeah.
yeah, you've got to have, so you buy these machines, like even if you put a 2 terabyte drive in there, that might get you in 4K like 20 to 30 movies.
Yeah, it sucks. So
You
you'll
know,
have to take that into consideration as well. My other
yeah,
suggestion for now is just if you buy a physical copy, just
yeah.
use Voodoo or something like that to watch it on digital, so it's easier for you to access and stuff like that, and then store the other copy just in case anything were to
That's the way to
happen.
do it,
But
and that's why I say you buy these things, like it's got the digital code in there, and it'll tell you, okay, here you enter your code, you go in there, and it'll say, "How do you want to redeem this?" And it usually gives you an option. You can pick iTunes, or you can pick Tom said, you can pick
if you
Voodoo.
go
You can
actually
do
through
these anywhere.
Movies Anywhere, they will generally put most titles on all of your things. So if you have
Yep,
Voodoo and iTunes and Amazon
that's
Prime,
what I do.
yeah, it generally puts almost every one of those. It's not every movie, it depends on the company, but
Some
eight
won't transfer over. Like
yeah,
sometimes I have to go to
8.9
Amazon
times out of
Prime, or
10
yeah,
ish. Like it's a majority of the time, but not every time. And I
yeah.
mean, there's even been times where I bought something on Amazon Prime and it'll transfer over to Vudu as well.
Hmm.
So like you'll have that as well. So I mean, I even do use digital. It sucks. I have to, because there's a lot of films that are on HD, but they're only on digital. Like Valiant just said he just picked up Bridge on the River Kwai on 4K. Well, I've had the digital 4K version now for the better part of half a year or
Hmm.
more. So there's a lot of stuff that's on digital that's not even on disc yet. So you'll run into
Yeah.
that problem too. I do have a few titles like that, unfortunately. And then Brian Barth had a quick question. What do you exactly need to watch 4K? Well, that's a pretty simple yet difficult question to answer in a sense that you need at least three things. You need a 4K TV that
Hmm.
handle, and if you really want the best quality, it's got to handle at least HDR 10 plus or Dolby Vision.
Hmm.
And then you have to have a player. And then you want to make sure that player handles one of both of those things as well. And that player can be anything from a standard set-top player you can buy, or your Xbox One will play 4Ks. As Valiant mentioned, the PS5 will play 4K Blu-rays. Otherwise, you just have to have something that's a 4K carrier. Even things like Netflix have 4K files and stuff on there for a lot of their movies. So, I mean, there's other places you can watch 4K besides a disc, but the recommended way to buy it or watch it would be from a 4K disc, because you're going to get the best quality possible.
Yep. And you can do it through, like, I've got 4 or 5 Apple TVs.
Yeah. So basically, then the third thing would be an actual something to watch. So
yeah, a physical disc or some source media. Yeah.
Exactly.
But you can stream if you want, like, if you even don't want to do physical disc, which, like Tom said, I would absolutely recommend, because if you really want to get the most, and the same went for Blu-ray, the same went for high definition. If you wanted to get the most out of the high definition, if you want to get the most out of 4K, you want to get that physical disc, because it's going to have the least amount of compression, ergo the highest picture quality that you can possibly get for that movie. But if you want to have some streaming capability, most televisions these days, if you buy a 4K set, they're going to have things like a Netflix app or a Vudu app, Movies Anywhere app, Roku, all that. They're going to have apps built into those smart TVs. If you want to get something that's going to have your iTunes and everything else, you want to be, and if you've got an iPhone, especially if you're into Apple stuff, buy an Apple TV. They start at $179. It's a little set-top box. It's basically their answer to a Fire TV stick from Amazon or a Roku or something like that. And it's everything in one place, and all of your iTunes. So, like, if you have an iTunes library of music or digital movies, all kind of stuff, you can drive all of that through there, along with Netflix, Amazon Prime, everything else. You can link in your cable TV or satellite TV subscription, your YouTube TV subscription. Shit, I watch YouTube through Apple TV right here all the time. Like, when you guys are talking, I send you pictures, like Toxic Femmes. Boom, you're on the big screen tonight. Stuff like that. So
you have options, yeah. But you at least need a carrier and a viewing screen. So that's the two main things, and of course, then a proper HDMI cord as well. Arasaka says, "Hail, gents, what's your take for a HTPC setup?" Valiant?
Home theater PC. So I've not done it, so I really can't give you a good opinion.
It's been a long time since I have too, but all I can say is depending on your setup, you're going to want it to. Nowadays, it's so easy compared to when I did it, right? Like, now you can just find one that has an HDMI output, or some TVs even still have the multi-plug or whatever on it, to where you can just plug it in that way. Just plug it in and you're ready to go. Or even through your home theater system or whatever. Like, I have a Onkyo Dolby Atmos system. I can plug in a computer or a laptop right into that, and the sound goes right through there. The picture goes straight through the TV and so on. So basically, you're going to want something with a decent video card to handle the best resolutions you can handle. As far as the sound, in most cases, you're probably going to be set up with they're going to be able to handle and stream most sound, but you may have to tweak and mess with the sound a little bit to make sure you're getting a Dolby digital signal or whatever it is you're needing to output from there, because sometimes you have to mess with it a little bit in the computer, and if you're not doing it right, it'll set up some fake version of it. But if you want like true multi-channel sound, you may actually either have to make sure you have the right software or a decent enough sound card. But in most cases nowadays, most sound cards that are built into most computers can handle multi-channel sound.
So that's usually not the big thing, but like Tom said, if you game a lot, you probably have a card more than capable of running 4K, because the demand for running a 4K movie is far less than your average game out there. So you're probably going to be fine. The only thing you'd want to do is, and I was trying to find it, that's why I went off screen for a second. Somewhere, but I have a a little portable Pioneer 4K drive it's a USB 3, and it just pops right in to the Mac, to the PC. And if you use a Mac, it's probably not going to work as well for you. I used it for burning Blu-rays, but it was about $150. And it's an external. Now, if you want an internal, you can buy those for about the same price and stick it into a PC tower if you have one. And you can play 4K movies on there. The biggest thing you're going to want to have is the proper monitor. I mean, that's the best thing you can do, is to buy it. So you're kind of in the same boat. It comes down to the screen, but you can use the PC as the source if you really want to. It just depends. Probably going that route is going to be more expensive, at least on that end, depending on if you're just building a PC to do that. I don't know. But
otherwise, out of the box, most I think Valiant's right. Like, most gaming PCs are going to probably have a decent enough video and sound.
You'll have plenty for that.
Do, especially if you're only watching video, right? So I mean, but if you're doing true gaming stuff, then you might want to build it yourself, I think. But that'd be our suggestion on that, and we'll probably take a couple more questions here, and we'll probably wrap it up. I think this show's been a huge success, considering I was kind of worried it wasn't going to be
Yeah, we've had almost 300 people
Yeah.
here the whole time for this first show. People
Exactly.
kind of getting used to the idea, and it's.
Yeah.
I know we did a lot more kind of tech stuff this time, but it
Yes.
was the first show, and Tom and I were talking about maybe we'll clip a few of these segments so people can go back and watch the explanations of
Yeah.
what it is and how it works if they ever want to go back. So future shows we can just talk about the discs, the movies, the new stuff. Yeah.
From here on out, it'll be more about like the news, your guys' questions, a couple of the movies we watched, how we feel about them, that kind of a thing. So like this time though, we just kind of wanted to intro everything. And again, whatever questions you guys have in the future, we'll try and get to as well. Brian Barth, who's firing in some great questions here, asks a very pertinent question. Do you think 4K will be the last physical media? Yes.
Yes. They have cameras now that are starting to come out, although they're not being widely used. There is 8K. And yes, it is 4 times the resolution of 4K. So we're now going from 8.8 megapixel capture to 32 or 36, megapixel capture. The bigger brother of this R6, this camera I brought in earlier, okay, there's an R5. I didn't get it because I didn't need 8K, but it has a 45 megapixel sensor for stills, which I still do a lot of still photography. But it will shoot in 8K. So when for comparison, when you guys see a good photograph, a professional quality photograph, even professional cameras like this one, that's a 20 megapixel sensor. Most photographs you see from weddings are shot on cameras with between 20 and 30 megapixel sensors, maybe as high as 35. So when you're talking about 8K motion capture, you're talking about something that has the same capture at a rate of a still photograph, which you're talking about 8K might work great for theaters, but now you're reaching the point of diminishing returns to where on a 55-inch or 65-inch screen at home, 4K is really, really good. You get to 8K. I can see where that might be interesting for live sports
or even gaming, maybe.
Yeah, but I don't.
And that's kind of what I've heard. Some of the leaders in the industry have kind of said, like, basically 8K will probably never be a home format.
You're talking about a disc that would have to have about a 400 gigabyte capacity.
Yeah, it's just you're getting to the point. Like I'll put an asterisk next to the final physical format. If we have anything after this, it's basically going to be a memory drive. Because the files are going to be so fucking huge.
Oh yeah,
you're going to have to have it on like
an optical disc. No,
no, this is the last physical. I'm pretty sure that's the case, unless there's some kind of revival down the road somewhere. But again, as I said earlier, Bryant, DVD isn't going anywhere. DVD still sells really well. Blu-rays sell fairly decently. At least for the next 10 years, these formats are going to be around for sure.
All the movies
and 8K is kind of
4K.
Already a home format. You're right, B. Edward, but there's nothing to watch on them.
Exactly. It's marketing. It's like, we're going to sell you a 32 megapixel panel. Great. What can I watch on it? 4K Blu-rays.
And that's the thing is until they actually start shooting movies like that, or here's the only other thing
shooting in 8K yet, guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say most of what I was going to say earlier, and then moving to the next portion. I was just going to say was the people that are going to be using 8K most of all, besides any kind of gamers and stuff like that, are going to be scientists and doctors.
Yep.
From what I heard, and tech people like that, for like a lot of techie stuff where you really need to get into like highly microscopic things and see like certain things and stuff of that nature. It's really not going to take off in the home format until either some kind of gaming system uses it, or they find a way to do 4K 3D, especially if you don't need the glasses and you have to have 8K to make that happen. That might be the only way I see that becoming a home format. But then again, you're still using a 4K format, just to have a better TV so you can view it in that nature. So I don't know if you have anything to add or take away from that, Valiant, but that's the only time I see an 8K TV coming in to being a very major market in any way, shape, or form.
No, if the screen sizes get enormously bigger, but like you said, it's about the science, it's the scientists and all that kind of stuff that are, we've had still camera capture at 50 megapixels now for 6-7 years, commercially available. The Canon 5D SR was the first one to do that. I've actually got one of those. But as far as motion capture, no. There's
that's just it. Until there's a lot of, I'm not saying never, maybe 30, 20 years from now, maybe even, we might have 16K TVs. But by that point, things will have advanced enough. Like, we're still at that infancy to where it's too too much. Because like we were just talking earlier, just to do a movie in 4K is an enormous undertaking.
Yeah.
Right. So Adam Wolford says the next big thing is 12K, but then 14K.
How many Ks you want? We got more Ks. We get you more Ks. How many Ks you need?
Yeah, see, that's the thing is the human eye can only see so much, right? Like you're going to get to a point where it's just, you know, we already have people saying, well, I don't see the difference looking at 1080p as opposed to 4K. It's like, you really think people are going to say that they see that much of a difference in 8K or 16K? I doubt it.
No.
Not
and a lot
unless,
of people
yeah.
they're not seeing the difference, and this might include Willie too. I don't know, but if you're watching it on streaming, yeah, and that's the point. Where's people watching it these days? People are watching stuff on streaming. So yeah, I agree that you're not going to see a enormous jump from 1080 to 4K on streaming, but that's a function not of the resolution. That's a function of streaming and the compression that it has to go through to get to you. But this is where, like I said, this is where you see the difference. But 8K, yeah, we're reaching the point of diminishing returns now. So
yeah, well, and that's basically because where we're at now with this, with the setup with 4K, it is pretty close to the type of colors and the amount of contrast that the human eye can intake.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've gotten to the threshold. Like this is it. And I'm sure if you had a really huge ass fucking monitor and you had something pumping through an 8K that was shot native in 8K or scanned in 8K and looked amazing, you might notice a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But you're probably going to be hard pressed to see the difference on a 75-inch screen at home, especially if you're sitting already 5, 6, 7 feet away from it. Because even then, at that point, the more you sit away from your TV, and this also comes into consideration, Willie. And I know you said something about you may not have it hooked up right as well, which is fair. But and again, also thing you need to take into consideration is the distance you're sitting from your monitor, because it doesn't matter what you're watching it in certain resolutions. It's not going to look much different if you're sitting far enough away.
Right.
Because it's no different than having the little picture on your screen on your computer. You know, you can take a standard definition video and shrink it down on your computer screen until it kind of almost looks like it's HD. Well, that's because, you know, you can shrink down that resolution in that little space, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what you're doing here when you're sitting farther and farther away from your television, is you're kind of zooming away from the picture. Or like your phone. Most phones don't run at a higher video bit rate on YouTube and shit than 1080p or 480p. There's no reason for them to run in 1080p because the picture's so small. You're technically already getting a 1080p picture as far as the size of the screen, right? Yep. It's the same as your eye perceives it the same way, right? Because it just you can't see the little little bit, like, unless you really stick your eyeball to it, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're getting just kind of insanely strange then. But
and that's why the 4K format, they wait a little while, because as you've noticed over time, you know, like earlier we started with the original broadcast TVs with little fishbowl. Those were 12-inch screens or 10-inch screens. Now the average size of the TV is what, 50, I think is the average now.
55, 50 or 55, I think most people have. Yeah.
And when DVD came out, the biggest TVs that we were selling that weren't like big giant projection boxes at that
were
time,
25,
27, 32, 36. And you went up to the projection sizes, you could get into the 60 range, but there weren't many people buying those, obviously.
No, because they look like trash on top.
There were a few of them that looked pretty good.
And near the end, they were getting better, yeah.
Oh yeah, we used to sell the Pioneer Elite ones, and those were gorgeous. And I mean, in the mid to late 90s, they were really, really pretty. But now we have, you know, the average set. You look at Black Friday, the average set that nobody's buying a 27-inch screen anymore.
Not often.
They're buying minimum. They're buying 40 or 50.
Well, when the price difference is like, you know, when you can walk into a Walmart now and you look at the rack and you can buy a 27-inch for $127. Or you can buy a 32-inch for $150, or you can jump up to the 55-inch 4K for only $200 and some dollars. What's your better choice there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's in a lot of cases, they're only making 4K models anymore, unless they're the smaller ones anyway.
Yeah, they're not even really pumping out the HD panels. It's just not worth it to the fabrication plants to pump those out, because everything's moved that way. But again, it's one of those things to where as the screens have gotten larger over time, the resolutions have gradually increase to catch up to it. Now, I don't know if we're going to come to a day where the average TV bought is 150 inches, not a
You
panel.
never know.
That's a hell of a big panel.
Honestly, I think we'll move into to projection more than anything.
Yeah, and that's just it. And then maybe we have 8K and 24K.
Because it'll probably become eventually we'll actually get holographic projection is what I think the next step up. And that's where the 8K and the 16K will come into play. Yes, you're right, Val. Yeah, by the time we actually utilize things like 16K and stuff like that, we'll be way past screens.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I think.
Yeah.
I think we've really reached the pinnacle at this point.
Yeah. Mango Badger says, great first show, guys. Keep it going. Maybe not in 4K, but you rock. Yeah, I wanted to broadcast it in 4K, but OBS wouldn't let me. Yeah. Oh, StreamYards won't let me, first of all, but then OBS, it lags like a motherfucker. I try to do 4K, and then YouTube yells at you and says, you're only allowed to do it in like 1260p. It's like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
Sorry. But anyway, Yellow Flash is in the house. My brother.
Hey.
Yeah, Walmart TVs are trash. They are 4K 120 hertz or go home. Yeah, if you're a gamer, make sure that's the one thing, because Jesse last night on our MEAD stream was bringing this point up, and he's a big gamer. And that's one thing we did push to him is definitely, if you're a gamer, worry about if it's 120 hertz or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you want to give a real quick spiel on that real quick, but thank you so much, Yellow Flash.
Yeah, thanks, Flash. Good to see you, man. Glad you made it. So what Flash is talking about, what Jesse was asking about, the 120 hertz refresh rate. So we talked a little bit about this on MEAD last night. So historically speaking, television, like when we used to watch broadcast television, it was broadcast to us when we had the rabbit ears on top of the TV at about 30 frames a second. Movies are shot in, still to this day, after almost 100 years, shot in 24 frames a second. So there was always a variance.
Well, here's the thing, Yellow Flash. I can't watch movies in 120 hertz. My TV won't let me because it says most Blu-rays are only put out in
24
60 hertz or 60 hertz at 24 frames. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well, But no, to that point, exactly what you just said, Tom, and that is why we now have 120 hertz capable sets. The power supplies, it's based on the power supplies. We used to have power supplies in televisions that ran at 60 hertz or 60 cycles per second, because in America, we have, guess what? We have 60 hertz electrical current. So we have power supplies to match that. 24 and 30 don't go into 60 evenly. 30 does, but not 24. So that's why the first DVD players had to manipulate this, because what directors really wanted was they wanted their films to be delivered in the same 24 frames a second that they shot it in. They didn't want it messed with. Well, now we have that, because most televisions, even though you might not run a game at 120 hertz, most of these high definition and especially 4K sets have power supplies that run at 120 cycles per second, because 30 goes into 120 equally 4 times and 24 goes into 120 equally 5 times. So now you have power supplies that can run natively both 30 frame per second or 60 frame per second, 24 frames a second, and you don't have to do any goofery inside the set. So
Yellow Flash says the display better too on 120 hertz. Also, the picture moves so smoother. Okay, what you're probably talking about then is what you have is a TV that's doing the smooth motion shit. Yeah. Yes. Okay. What that is, Flash, scary. It works okay for video games, but for movies, what you're doing is artificially adding a frame in between every frame, because movies only run at 24 frames per second.
Yeah, they use like digital noise reduction. And
and so
it looks like a soap opera. Yeah, it looks like you're watching Days of Our Lives or some shit, and it drives me nuts. Now, maybe that's not what Flash is talking about, but I mean that's what maybe not. When he said that.
That's what I think you're talking about. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And actually, I'll throw you a link if I'm wrong. But as far as I know, that's how I know it, because like most movies won't run at that rate. Like that's the problem I ran into, because to do 24 frames per second.
The big thing is not the big thing is not to either add or subtract data from the original source. So if you want to play a movie that was shot in 24 frames a second, the screen may still the screen generally refreshes kind of with the power supply, even though our eyes don't detect it. But what we're not doing like we used to is we're not inventing frames and fields or removing information to make it look a certain way. And that was like what the True Motion stuff does. What happens is it takes out the motion blur. And film should have a natural motion blur to it. Our human eye can't see the blur because it's moving by at 24 frames a second, but it's there if you look at each frame on a negative individually. what it tries to take that out, and it makes it, like I said, it makes it look like a soap opera, and I hate it. Most aficionados will hate it too. Some people like the way it looks, and that's fine, but that's why you can turn it on or turn it off.
Yeah, and I sent you the link, Yellow, if you got a few minutes, you want to just come in and explain the difference, because I don't want to be saying the wrong thing either.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, as far as I know, though, like, yeah, because, like, Edward's saying you need a pull down, which, yeah, that's my thing, because it even told me I couldn't run it at that.
Yeah.
I
mean,
motion
like I
blur
said-
sucks. I like the way it moves better. You like motion blur?
Oh, well, okay. So he doesn't like the motion blur in the film. He likes it when the true motion removes it. Okay.
See, I don't like that.
To each his own. I get it, man. That's cool. I like the way that looks flash, like if I'm watching live sports. That true motion kind of looks neat.
Well, television usually, if it's shot in a video, that's the other thing is it's
Yeah.
actually more for video,
It
right?
is.
It's more
Video
for video and
versus
video
film.
games.
Yeah.
When you're watching film, you're technically supposed to shut it off. Like even if you flipped your TV into film mode, in most cases, that's where I think you're talking about earlier, Valiant, where it will shut off.
Yeah,
the
the
true
ISF
motion.
mode on the LG set will turn all the true motion off. Now, if you want to
Yeah.
override it and still have the color grading on there, you know, to where everything is color corrected on the set, but you still want to turn true motion on, you can still do that too. But yeah.
Yeah. See, like Peter Jackson did shoot The Hobbit at 48 frames a second, but the Blu-ray is only at 24.
24. Yeah.
And same thing with that Gemini Man movie, was also shot at the higher frame rate, and then the Blu-ray is down. And I'm glad, because it looks like crap as far as I'm concerned. But hey, to each his own on that one, Yellow Flash. I mean, that's your call. But I mean, I know my personal thing is shut that motion shit off. That's not how a movie is supposed to look. It's supposed to have motion blur. And what really bothers me is when I've seen lately is some people have gone back and even taken things like Phil Tippett's animation from RoboCop and said they fixed it, when all they really
I
did,
saw those YouTube videos.
all
That
they
looks
did,
awful.
Oh, it's like you took the motion blur out. The shit the man worked hard to get in there to make it look.
They added like all the extra frames. Yeah, it was at like 4K 60 frames a second. And I'm like, oh, it looked like shit.
What did you do to it?
Oh, God.
Ugh, it took out all the.
I have not seen the higher frames per second Hobbit release. I don't believe. I mean, it was. I think it was.
I didn't, but
exhibited
Andre
like that
didn't.
in theaters.
He hated it.
And
he hated it.
Yeah, I don't. I have the Blu-ray and the 4K extended edition box sets of that and the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Now,
but that's all 24.
Is the Hobbit actually 4K? I think that one was that was actually from beginning to end 4K.
Yeah, because Lord of the Rings was still shot on film.
Yeah.
Hobbit, I think it was a mixture. Shoot, I grabbed.
Well, no,
Lord
I
of
think
the
they
Rings,
mastered that one. Yeah, no, the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings one, when they did the remaster, they went back to the negative for the film part. So all the film stuff is 4K.
Mhm.
They had to up convert some of the effects though. But the thing is, with the first Lord of the Rings, yeah, it does script.
Yeah.
Script's coming on next time too. I didn't know he knew this stuff much about 4K, but like the thing is, with the effects, they had to up convert some of the effects. But with Lord of the Rings, most people don't realize how much was shot in camera for the first Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit, on the other hand, is a lot more digital.
Yeah.
But that one, I think he did those from beginning to end, because he shot them in 5K, and I think they did the effects and everything in 4K, if I'm not mistaken. So those Blu-rays might be 4K to beginning to end. I'd have to double check.
He shot that when there was kind of that wave, I think, when Red was becoming more popular.
Yeah.
You know, in Hollywood, the Red.
It was on the Red camera. Yep.
Yeah, because I know, like, they shot that was the big thing. Like when they did Guardians 2, I think that was one of the first big major scale.
But see, now that was one that was up converted on Blu-ray.
Yeah,
but I mean, it looks like shit.
But like the original one was shot on the I think it was on the Red Helium.
Yeah, I don't have
it was their 6K camera. It was the first 6K camera that Red made, is what they shot that one on. Maybe it was Guardians 1, but I think it was Guardians 2.
Well, Guardians 2 I know has the 2K interpositive, because I checked it. Because
because they're all so heavily CGI. You can't work
compared to the
4K
3D Blu-ray
and animate over it.
Because the version I bought had the 4K, the regular, and the 3D in it. It was the only way you could get the 3D in that exclusive Steelbook through Best Buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I compared the regular Blu-ray, compared it to that with the 3D. The 3D looks so much better than the 4K version. The 4K version looks muddy as shit. Sure, the colors pop a little bit, but it looks so like there's like no detail to it.
Yeah. There's a comment that just popped up from Edgy number 1. I think that's a good issue.
I just want to
look
say
at.
thank you to
Yeah.
Taker 610 here before I forgot. But then you said Edgy number 1, this one?
Yeah. Okay, so full HD RoboCop on Blu-ray was grainy and awful. So there was a few different versions, as we were talking about earlier. There were a few different versions of the Blu-ray that was made for
Yes.
RoboCop. So you might have one of the earlier ones that was done very poorly versus the latter ones. But I do want to address, bear in mind, grainy. There's a lot of movies that I have that have beautiful 4K transfers that still are grainy.
I want
quote
grain.
unquote. Yeah, because that's natural film grain back then, especially in movies like that, especially in those darker street scenes. They're using higher sensitivity film. They're shooting on ISO 800, 1600, some
Grain is
3200.
detail, yeah.
You're going to get a lot of grain in there because of the sensitivity needed for the film to shoot that given scene. Now, the bad thing that happens with these older movies that have grain in it is when they get really heavy-handed in these remasters and they use this heavy digital noise reduction or DNR and because they want to remove the grain. But what happens when they remove the grain is they also erase a lot of the detail.
Yep.
So so your better remasters retain a healthy degree of the original natural film grain.
Exactly.
And not kill the detail that was picked up. So it's a trade.
2 prime examples.
Yeah.
Number 1 would be the first version of Predator that came out in HD. Everybody knows the one I'm talking about. Everybody looks like they're made out of plastic.
Oh, I have it. It sucks.
And the recent version of Terminator 2 in 4K. Do not buy it. If you haven't bought it already and you think the new version coming out is a new remaster, it is not. It's the same version they've released before. They're just putting it in a fucking steelbook. That's the only difference. It looks the same way. It's that rubbery shit. Okay, you're supposed to get a little grain. Now, Edgy number 1. That's my question too, is which version did you see? Because I busted a few weeks ago MGM, and I can't wait till more people realize this. They have been releasing movies on Blu-ray from up-converted DVD masters.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's very possible if you have one of the older versions of RoboCop, it's probably an up-converted DVD master and not an actual HD scan. Now, Arrow went back and rescanned RoboCop in 4K, and it looks amazing. There is not a new HD copy out there. You can get a digital copy in 4K, but I compared it to the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray looks better because it's the higher bit rate. So from that 4K master, that Arrow disc, which was on sale, it might still be. Pick it up if you can, and if you don't have it already, I guarantee you it'll look so much better than the old MGM discs. The old MGM discs look like shit. And I busted them because they released Overboard a couple weeks ago. Well, actually, they didn't. Kino Lorber, I think, released Overboard a few weeks ago, and it said for the first time ever scanned in 2K. And I'm like, wait a minute, I already have Overboard on my shelf. So I got a hold of somebody who knows somebody over at Kino Lorber, and they asked them directly, did they not scan that in 2K originally? And he's like, yeah, it was just a DVD up convert. Because they scanned a lot of their DVD scans in like 720 or 520p back in the day.
Oh. Yeah, I was about to say they probably did 720 and then down converted to 480. And then now they're just 720 is technically considered HD. It's just not
it's not
full
1080p.
HD. Yeah. So they just we'll up convert that 720 to
so chances are any MGM movie you bought in the last I don't know how many years is probably not a true 1080p master until they've recently gone back and remastered some of them. Now I know all the Bond movies have been remastered, but I don't know the scans they did. I don't think they were from the negatives because I have the digital versions of those and they don't look that great. Now they're going to start releasing them on disc here this year, I believe. So we'll see how they look on disc. Yeah. B. Edwards says they didn't rescan it. I'm pretty sure they did because it was a 4K master. I'll have to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure they did because it looks a hell of a lot better than the old one. And I'm pretty sure it even says right on the back of the disc it was rescanned in 4K.
So yeah, I'm looking at the it was the 4K. I mean, excuse me, the RoboCop Blu-ray trilogy collection.
No, not that one. That's the old one.
That is the old one. Okay,
I'm talking about the newer one that is 2019 that they released it.
Okay.
They didn't release it in 4K, but it was scanned in 4K. It may not have been from the negative, but it still looks better than the other version, that's for sure.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Let me see here. Okay, it says Arrow to release stunning new restored 4K Blu-ray edition of Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. This is from back then.
RoboCop limited edition 2019. Yeah. That's the most recent one I see.
Yeah,
here.
a 4K restoration from the original camera negative.
Yep, that's got a video score on Blu-ray of 4.5.
Yeah, it looks great. I can't wait till they actually release a UHD, but yeah, so unless you know something I don't, Ed, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But with that, I think we're going to start wrapping this up. I think it's been a pretty successful show.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a blast.
Yeah, and fake HD, is that what? Yeah, that's probably what I was talking about. Yeah, they may have scanned some in 1080i as well.
Yeah.
MGM might have. That's very plausible. But I knew they were up to something. So.
Yeah, and that's when they don't know what kind of sales they're going to get, right? So they go into an endeavor like this, like we were talking about. They got to go back to original film negatives. They got to rescan them. They have to get a colorist to come back. I know, but it's like, do they want to spend $250,000 putting this together and they're afraid it's like, well, we might not sell $250,000 worth of discs. We might not recoup. So
okay, I didn't see this, but he says
Arrow
confirmed it was rescanned by MGM that came out a few years prior. Arrow stated this on their Facebook. I'd have to go see that because I am on their Facebook, but I don't remember them saying that. Because whatever, then it still looks better than the other one does.
You got me curious now.
Yeah, I'll have to do some investigation into that. But I wouldn't be surprised though, because MGM's just a bunch of shady fucks. It sounds like.
Well, Amazon's got them now.
So. Yeah, hopefully Amazon will fix that if that's the case.
Yeah, Amazon's not. They're not going to put out discs anymore at all.
No,
they're just going to put it all on Amazon Prime. That's going to be the end of the day. Like I say, if you don't own what they got now,
because now I knew that the Shout Factory ones weren't rescanned. That I knew, but I don't know. I'll have to look here. That's interesting. I'll check into that, but thanks for letting me know that, B. Edward. Other than that, was there anything else that we needed to touch on? I think we went a little bit longer than we'd planned on, but you guys, the response to the show has been amazing, you guys. Thank you so much for showing up. I did not expect this many people
I didn't either. I figured we'd get maybe 100 people just kind of sitting around, dicking around, listening. I'm like, we got 300 people this whole time. So,
yeah, that's amazing.
This is the first show. People are going to find out about it. And next time, it's not going to be so much tech. We're going to, we'll try to get into more of the actual movies. Yes. Now that we've kind of set the stage, it's time to start the show.
Yeah, we'll actually get into more news and actual movies and releases and what's going on in the industry and all that good stuff. And we'll try and get some more guests in here to talk about that kind of stuff. And I guess you are Cellar Door AU. I did not believe there was this many physical media nerds because, to be honest, I started out before I got brought on to Midnight's Edge. My original channel was more about Blu-rays and stuff, and I just couldn't get people to watch. So there you go.
Yep. Well, it was good to see everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys.
Thank you so much. Check out Valiant Renegade's channel. Do yourself a favor. If you like it, hit the subscribe button. If you like the show today, hit the like button. If you didn't like the show today, tell us in the comments why you didn't. We always appreciate that, and then we try to make it better.
Tell us what you want us to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
If you have movies, like we got a lot of people say, "Hey, can y'all talk about this disc coming out or talk about this?" Let us know, because this is kind of wide open. Give us some feedback.
Absolutely. And like I said, we'll bring in some other people too in the future. And other than that, I just want to say later I'll be talking more movies and physical media, but not just 4K. This show goes about all physical media, and that's over on Fanzine's channel. I don't see a link yet for the show, so I'll just send you guys the link for his channel. Go ahead on over there and subscribe so you get the alert. But that'll be in roughly 90 minutes from now. We'll be talking about just physical media in general. It's a nice little show. We talk about all kinds of stuff over there. I'll usually have a couple people pop in and have fun. But I want to thank you, Valiant. This is a great idea. I mean, it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And, I wanted to do something with like Robert or something like that, but then he has his own show already. So it's kind of nice to find somebody that loves 4K as much as I do. And from the looks of it, Script Doctor knows a lot more than I thought he did too. So we may have to bring him into the mix.
Awesome. Yeah.
I didn't realize he was that big of a fan of some of this techie stuff. I knew he was a writer, but damn. So, all right. Well, next time hopefully we'll have more to talk about, and we'll definitely get into more of the news and all that business. So thank you again, everybody, for watching and making the show a success. And thank you, Valiant. And
thanks for having me.
Then,
and thanks to Midnight's Edge for hosting.
Yeah. No problem, man. And check out Valiant's link in the description. Thanks, guys.